So it's time for me to introduce Salve Nilsen, of whom I don't actually have a bio here right now, which I assume is my own fault. So he's a... No, I don't. He's from Oslo PM and organizer of various conferences involved in the PAL 5 and the PAL 6 community. And I'll leave it to you, Salve, to introduce you more. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Hello. It's nice to see so many people here. I'm having a rant, kind of very informal talk about some very nice and loose topics. So if you have opinions, then please feel free to share them with me, or just raise your hand and we can make a little detour. I shouldn't eat while I'm talking. Let me drink. I need caffeine also. So, I'm ranting for Perl Lepidopterologists made easy. I'm sure some of you wondered a little bit what I mean with that. But first, as Moritz said, I'm Salve Nilsen. I'm from Oslo Perlmongers. There, I've been involved in community stuff, organizing the local place, hacking on different things for different interesting and varyingly cool employers. And I tend to talk too much about community stuff. And my goal for this talk was to not talk about that much of a community stuff, but it ended up being like that anyway, so I'm sorry. And I'm looking for some interesting things to do, so talk with me if you know of any good places to go. In this talk, let's talk about a little bit, a few words about why I want to talk about this topic, about ranting and lepidopterologists, and a little bit about aesthetics, and a new word here, lepidopterologisms. I'm really not making this easy for myself. And perhaps if you have any comments or questions, we'll have time for that too, I hope. So, lepidopterology, just to get it out of the way, it's the study of butterflies. That's it. And my goal with this talk here is to get you guys and us as a community to think a little bit more about how we can make learning and teaching and promoting Perl 6 a little bit easier than we perhaps have had the last 15 years with Perl 5. First, a little bit of the motivation. Do you guys know the Chaos Communication Congress and CCC, the Chaos Communication Club? Hands in the air, please. So, well over half of you. So this is like a huge German club, computer club, who does all kinds of interesting things, and they have a big congress with some 10 to 12,000 attendees every Christmas, between Christmas and New Year's. The 31st one of those was in 2014, and the 32nd C3 was in 2015, like last year, like a few months ago. And there were two talks, one of each of them, given by a guy called Natalian Rubin, I think, about Perl. And have any of you guys seen that talk? Hands in the air. Maybe a third of you. Yeah, there are several issues with that talk. Those talks, both of them. But his main point was basically, please don't use Perl. And that's like, this is part of my motivation here, is to see, okay, what can we, should we do anything about that? Because in some ways, well, okay, this is the first talk description, just to give you an idea here. This is from his description of the talk in 2014. chain several of Perl's ridiculous syntax quirks in order to create a surprisingly powerful attack. These very big words. And this is for 2015. After last year's Perl crackdown, I decided to have take the Perl abuse to the next level. So this guy, he has a special type of humor. And we have to remember that this guy, he is out to have fun. That's what he's doing. That's what he did. What could we do about that? So what? Like, he's on the internet and people are saying nasty stuff there all the time, and we can take that, right? We can. We have thick skin. Well, this is like some guy from Israel who has some points about security, and he says so in a way which has some humoristic elements and some funny pictures, and that's, well, okay, it's a public shaming, but it's not that bad, but we should not accept that. I think so. We as a community should do something about this situation. That's my opinion, and that's some of the things I want to talk to you about today. We should fix it, but we should be careful on how we do it, because we shouldn't blame the guy who is funny. He's there to entertain people, and it's like a gesture in the court. He's above reproach. He can say anything, and that's okay. As technical content goes, maybe he should go more into entertainment business rather than technical stuff. So I would not tell him to keep his day job. I would say switch to entertainment. But that's okay. The people who are in the program committee, they obviously don't care about Perl. They're into security stuff and politics and society and civil rights issues and all kinds of other super interesting things. And if somebody comes in and says something about this old battered programming language, then the check, like, okay, is it funny? Check, yes, okay, we'll put it there. So the programming committee should not be blamed, and neither the organization, the club. The CCC isn't a Perl shop. It isn't a Perl organization. Maybe you could say it is friendly towards open source projects in some ways, but it's not like their thing. They're a friendly organization at best. But they're more after security stuff, finding vulnerabilities, talking about them, and doing clever stuff with computers. There's a community, though. That's us. We should blame ourselves a little bit. And that's exactly what Nathaniel Rubin says. He doesn't blame us. I think we should blame us. Because we didn't teach these guys. And now I've been around traveling a little bit now, quite a few months. I visited a few cities here in Germany, visiting hackerspaces and trying to knock on the doors of Perlmongers here and there with very varied success. It's been not as easy as I'd hoped. And I learned that the Perl community in Hamburg does not exist. And Hamburg is like, for this event, it's like the main seat of the organizers, since the conference is in Hamburg. Berlin has Berlin Perlmongers, but you guys in Berlin, anyone from Berlin here? One person, yeah. Hi, Tina. So you guys have enough to do, and going around teaching this enormous computer club about what they should know and don't know. That's like, you can't leave it to a few people. So it's us together as a community should think about this, not just the few volunteers that we have out there. So before I go into the interesting stuff, I'll take a few obvious points here. What do? Well, we start hanging out with these guys. They're actually pretty interesting. I've been to several CCC chapter places, and they're interesting people. You can have cool discussions. And yes, some of them will say, "Oh, you do Perl," and they like they make some grimaces and some funny noises. And I try to say, "Well, don't worry. This is not 1999 anymore. This isn't 2006 anymore. Things have happened. You should update your worldview a little bit." And most people, well over half of the ones I've talked with, are quite receptive. So it works to talk with people and just to be there and say, "No, that's not right." So, okay, the situation is, yeah, there's work to do. So there's a reason to have there's some, at least some reason to talk about stuff. Looky here, interesting. So, what should we do then? We need ammunition. And that means basically some good stories to tell and some awesome things to show. And that leads us into the question of aesthetics, because if we're talking about cool stuff, awesome things, this is a judgment of aesthetics. And now we touch upon the super horrible bits of pieces everybody who does Perl, I would claim, tries to stay away from, because we've had our discussions about how should code look like and stuff like that. I don't want to go there. But we still have to figure out good ways of recognizing something which is the code, which in such a way that we avoid the porn trap, basically. What is porn? This American courts say basically, we will not define it, but we know it when we see it. So no, that's not helpful. That's we can say this code is awesome, or this code is bad because we can say a few things about it, but if we say show me and I'll tell you if it's good, then we're not teaching anything in useful skills when it comes to recognizing aesthetically pleasing code or whatever. But there's a couple of things I think we should stop doing at least, and a couple of those are to say stuff like write readable code or write in your own style, but be consistent. I tried to get this one point at a time, so you didn't get the result here. But saying to somebody, please write something that is readable, is like you can imagine you have a publisher talking with an author, somebody who writes for a living. Like, well, we write for a living in some way, and the publisher says, you write what you want to do, but the important thing is that what you write is readable. Yes, so that means no crayons for you. We don't want the squiggles, we want letters, and make sure the R's go the right direction, right? No, this is like you talked with certain age groups, like children and 6-year-olds, and we shouldn't do that. Same goes with consistency. Write as you want. No, but be consistent because we can learn your style. That's kind of the same thing. Sure, it's nice to give people the freedom, but we're forgetting that you're not alone when you're writing code. You're not writing just for yourself, never just for yourself. I would say actually, if you write code and you think you're writing for the compiler or you think you're writing for the customer, I would say you're wrong. You're writing for the next guy. You have an audience, basically, when you write stuff, like an author of a book. Somebody will read it and they will judge what you read. And they will say, what the fuck is going on here? Picture this door here which says what the fucks per minute on the sign outside. This XKCD cartoon. There's no pictures here, so you have to imagine a little bit. So let's raise our expectations a little bit. Let's stop saying that the readability is important, because if we tell people that the code you write has some higher quality that you should live up to. Say, for example, there is a narrative there, a storyline almost, like beginning, a middle, and an end. That's maybe a top-down way of looking at the code, like with a high level. This is a setup of something. Then you get some data, you do some calculations, and then you save it somewhere, and then you finish off stuff. That's a tiny, super simple narrative with a beginning, and a middle, and an end. If we just keep that in our mind, then suddenly it becomes easier to tell people about what good things is, because it's easier to understand a linear story. Same when you're thinking bottom up. When you talk with authors about writing complex novels, they have a step called world building, where they basically don't write a book about it, but they make notes about how that specific universe works. What premises are there in the society that this story goes on. If it's a science fiction book, it could be some stuff like this planet has a gravity of 1.2 g. And those decisions are made as early as possible, and they influence the rest of the story in certain ways. So let's keep in mind world building as one thing. And when we're talking about aesthetics, we can also think of all the words we use. We don't use the top ones there. Talk about code that is interesting or elegant or understandable. Well, understandable is, for me, it's okay, but it's not like, I don't know how to put this. I'm imagining when you talk about readable and consistent, it's kind of a low-level kind of adjective. It's you describe something positive in something, but it's about a very basic thing, like you exist. We assume that's positive. But if you talk about gripping or funny, you talk about not some detail of what you're doing, but of something larger. And those kind of adjectives is something I think we should start forcing ourselves to talk about. And while we're here, there's also aesthetics from journalism. Like when you look at the, oops. Let's come on. There. Like, thorough and gripping. That's something you might say about an article in a newspaper. It's still a kind of text which is relevant for us, because journalistic texts are also useful. And they have a set of aesthetics also which we can adopt and learn from. Stuff like, what the fuck? Okay, well, yeah. So we can talk about terseness and completeness, and also whether or not you can get the point across in that article, but also about structure, like you write about the important things first. That's a journalistic thing you do. You make sure that the absolute first, the headline tells the big points, so you can just understand something just by reading it. And the first few lines are a very, very high-level summary, and the next few lines are basically the same content, but a few more words and some details. And then you go into depth later. And you can do this structure, the same code is the same way as a newspaper article in this way. So they have some qualities too. This makes me want to share with you a quote from this British journalist, a quote which I've told several Perl people over the years. I like it a lot. There's a guy called Cyril Connolly. He wrote in a book like 80 years ago, plus almost. Literature is an art of writing, something that will be read twice. Journalism, what will be grasped at once. I like to say it in more words because I'm not as efficient as this guy in writing. He writes about how to be a good author also, and this quote is from his book about that. Basically, what he's saying there is write in such a way that you understand it after one reading and you want to read it again because it was interesting or funny or something like that. If you write code that's like that, then we have something we can show other communities or outside the Perl bubble. Then we have something really, truly awesome. We're not there yet, and I do admit it's not the easiest thing to do. So, now that we've kind of dived a little bit into what I mean, at least, about aesthetics, what would the lepidopterologists do about this? Because recognizing something aesthetically pleasing, that's fine, but you kind of have to know how to make it. So let's try and see if we can talk something about that. We mentioned word building and narratives. We have also audiences. That's yourself in 3 months. That's your audience when you write something. Never forget that. But we have lots of tools we can use. And this is where we go into Perl 6 as a topic. I will not cover Perl 5 in much ways because you guys already know that super well, and I'm sure you know some Perl 6 also. But if you look at stuff like meta operators and custom operators in Perl 6, or multi-methods, or all these cool things that you guys already have heard something about yesterday and are going to hear more about later today, these are language tools that we can use to create awesome stories. We can basically, well, it's not like you're writing a novel, right? But you take the tools you have available, and if the problem you're trying to solve has an essence of its problem domain that is mathematical, then thinking and telling a mathematical narrative is probably a smart thing and the same thing and an interesting thing to do. So then at that point, it's fantastically useful to have the ability to make custom operators that you can use to do all fancy stuff, sums or limits or whatever matrix calculations are. I don't know. You'll have to figure it out. It's your story in some ways that you're going to make it, but make it interesting. These are all tools that you can do. And one thing which I think is worth considering is the fact that we're doing multi-paradigm work. Because, how am I on time, by the way? Okay, so I'll slow down. 50 minutes. 15, all right. So we have Perl 6 is a multi-paradigm language. That means we can express ourselves in all kinds of different ways. This is like one of the gifts from the Perl 6 community to the rest of the world. We have now a language that we can express anything with as we think fits the problem domain as the best. If something lends itself to the domain-specific language, we have the grammar system to make that one and make it look nice and do what is necessary. All kinds of cool stuff. Very confusing. All right. So we'll touch a little bit perhaps on multi-paradigm later. So your audience, yeah, this is multi-paradigm. what we're talking about here. Because if you use some interesting features in Perl 6 in order to write something that is elegant or cool or whatever adjective you choose to judge it with, that's fine. You're doing something cool and you can show it to the next guy. But if you're making a library, you're kind of giving a little piece of language to the next guy. And that next guy should be able to write their own little story. They should have the same freedom to put together an interesting narrative in their code that you got when you wrote your own library. And that means basically if their way of solving their problem requires an object-oriented way of doing things, but you only supply a procedural one, you're kind of forcing one way of storytelling into a different way of storytelling. It becomes weird. Let's think, can we come with an example here in a story way? Do you get what I mean? I had some thoughts here, but I'm missing it. Okay. But if you bother making both the object-oriented interface and, say, an operator-focused one, then the next guys basically can pick and choose as it fits them. And that's a feature which is positive for to make use of. Actually, one of the critiques I hear from lots of people is that there's too many ways to do things with Perl. The Tim Towdy thing is actually to our detriment. It's a bad thing. But I'm saying, no, it's a good thing. It's actually really good because if we think about a narrative way of coding, we get to choose how to tell those stories. We don't have to use all of them. It's nice if we do it in an interesting way, or something which is pleasant to read and people think is like a good example or something which they can point at and show to their colleagues and say, hey, this is really cool. But it kind of needs to be coherent. And by offering a tool, a library to the next guy that lets them choose and pick and choose how to use it, that makes things a little bit easier for everyone. Oh, all right, some recap. Write some examples. We have an audience. If you write something you can point at and be proud of, that's awesome. Yeah. When I've been talking with different friends, some of you guys even, I've been trying to give some examples of what I'm actually thinking about. An example I've usually given is like, imagine this Greek hero on the way out of his town into the wilderness to fight some monster. This is the story. You try to write a story that as it progresses, you don't suddenly, okay, let's say he rides on a horse along a beach, and suddenly in the middle of the story, you read about the blood inside the horse, how it pumps through its veins and goes to the lungs and dumps off the CO2 and picks up some oxygen and then moves through the heart and into the muscle. That's like, doesn't make sense for a good story. You don't switch like that. What you can do instead is say that this hero ends up at the beach for the night with a group of new friends around the fireplace, around the campfire, and suddenly he decides to tell a story. So you get stories within stories. This is a common thing in Greek literature and lots of other places. Whereas where the point of that story might be relevant for the major one, but it's all contained. It's like it itself has a beginning and a middle and an end, like all stories do. So there's a question also about abstraction levels, that you keep a storyline on the same abstraction level. You don't dive into suddenly an open call to pick up some data from this file somewhere, twiddle some bits, and then write it in the middle of something which is obviously high level. Not the best example, but that's something. That's one thing to think about. Yeah, we've got 10 minutes left, so we have some questions and comments. Masak is in the back and needs a microphone. Yes. So the point here, if you saw it back here, is let's make some cool stuff and then go and show it off to people like the CCC and perhaps even Natalia and Rubin, showing him like, hey, this is cool stuff. You shouldn't diss us.
Okay, my question is, so as a bit of background, I'm one of those friends with whom Salve has discussed this idea earlier, and I'm kind of intrigued by it. But now as I was listening to the talk, my question becomes, are you addressing here very high-level developers who don't have the problem that they are writing non-readable code? It sounds like that to me. You sort of go through stages as a programmer, and a couple of the first stages is, this code is crap. I can see it myself. It works, but I can't read it.
But
10 minutes later.
That's a continuum, basically. I would claim that your code looks crap 6 months later, no matter what you do or your level. So we can learn from that there is no authoritative ways of saying it's awesome or not, but it's a constant learning process. You improve through trying out. Also, you improve by showing off your code and getting feedback, and learning through discussion at the office or on the mailing list or the IRC channel or stuff like that. But no matter what level you're at, even if you're like the most naive newbie who just wants to solve a problem to make his or her boss happy, I think you could benefit from having some nice unreachable goals to strive for. Unreachable in the fact like you will probably never manage to create this awesome piece of literature that everybody like says the moment they say the code. But you can try, and after trying a while, you actually might get better to the point where you might say, this is publishable. I can put this on GitHub and point it to whoever cares. It might be colleagues or the next boss you are going to have, and show them this portfolio of yours that you're actually pretty good at programming, and not only that, what you write is an enjoyment. It gives enjoyment to read. Nobody gets there on a key turn. You have to work for it, I'm sure. Even us who have been around for a while, I suck at programming, but I can share thoughts. That's what I'm doing. So I'm sure it'll take 20 years before I'm there, but I'm very sure that quite a few of you guys already are there, or at least pretty close. And if you take the steps and to actually become better in this aspect, in this way of thinking, and then publish it, we'll all benefit in all kinds of cool ways, no matter what level you are in the beginning. That's what I'm hoping for.
So we had a second question here.
Thanks. One of your slides, I think the one with the do's and don'ts, had the first line dashed out.
Yeah.
And the second line said, yeah, that one. The second line says, understandable is a good high-level adjective to strive for, and maintainable isn't. I'm questioning that a little bit. I think that maintainability is the stronger requirement than understandability, and furthermore, later you explain that you write for yourself most of the time, and
I would say do not.
if you have code that you can understand but no longer maintain for whatever reasons, then you have to redo it. And my personal experience is that in earlier years I tried to write compact, elegant code, yeah, whatever that meant to me, and I was very happy if I had the opinion that this was compact because it was easy to read, but it turned out that it was not that easy to maintain, because half a year later you can't really make out which side effects were intentional and which side effects were overlooked. So given two different algorithms doing the same thing today, I would choose maintainable over elegant. It's sad to say that, but over time you learn that this is, in the long run, less painful.
I have a couple of things there. Elegant could mean a lot of things. It doesn't have to be short. It could be simple or easy to understand. And I put maintainable on the top there with the strike through, because maintainable actually doesn't say anything concrete. Understand is something you can understand. Understandable you can understand. The word understandable means you can read something and almost like serialize it in your brain. You build up a mental model and you say, oh, this is what this is supposed to do. And it's easy to take the next step because you understand it. You have understood the purpose and what's going on, and perhaps even what the bug is that you have to fix. But maintainable could be anything. It's very relative, because if you're an expert, your code might be maintainable for yourself, but the next guy looks at it and says, well, it's very short and nice, but there's some magic going on here. So you've kind of, with maintainable in this sense, you're forgetting the fact that we should also have an audience that is not yourself. You're writing for someone else, always. And the act of writing something that communicates the intention well, that's the point here.
Every now and then people make bad design decisions.
Of course.
Yeah, and a bad design decision can still be understandable and still be bad.
Yeah,
if it's maintainable, then this also includes extendable. Maintainable means that you keep options for later developments in some directions. Therefore, I think I'm not convinced. I think maintainable is stronger to achieve than understandable. Understandable is necessary but not sufficient. Maintainable is a goal.
All right, fair enough. I think I got my point across anyway. Any more questions?
We can agree to disagree on this point, I think. There's another mention.
I don't exactly have a question, but I want to comment on one of the things that you said. It's like about showing the world, about like those high-level things or elegant code. I think the best way of doing, or one of the best ways of doing that is, I don't know, has anyone here heard about Reddit Daily Programmer? No one. Well, that's something on Reddit with 80,000 subscribers. So like every 2 days, there's a contest.
There's 3 tasks, an easy one and a difficult one.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, right.
And 80,000 subscribers. Those are people who are really interested in programming. And well, we've got a lot of Python solutions there. And I always try to write Perl 6 solutions, and there are also a couple of other guys who are trying to write Perl 6 solutions. And people love the Perl 6 solutions. For example, I don't know anyone who knows does everybody know the game Reversi, for example?
Oh, yeah.
Somebody showed all the possible moves of reversey using a grammar in Perl 6. I mean, that's really nice, and people love those solutions. And I think this is a really great way of showing the world, yeah, how great that new language is. So probably you should check it out on Reddit. Yeah. It doesn't take much time to solve such a contest. It's also a really good way of learning the language.
That's a good feedback. If you bring this attitude with you to this forum, saying like, I want to make something which is beautiful or awesome or elegant, and you're confident that you can do that, this is a fantastic place to do it, because you can reach so many people. And I've seen the forum you're talking about, and there were quite a few really cool examples there. And also, it seemed there were only like one or two people a few people who were doing Perl 6 there, but you could benefit from more, as long as it's good stuff. I have to make them repeat the point. Let's show the best we have.
So, wait. There's no point in talking without a microphone.
Alongside the timeline, as there are many coding downflows in many cities, and it's a good idea to go from coding downflow to the task in Perl, and show that you can do cool stuff with Perl in a coding downflow.
Yeah, coding dojos are also very fun. I've been through a few of those. Yeah, like the forums we can show off stuff is not only the CCC, as you guys made point of it. There's lots of places we can show off, but that's not my point. We know that we live in some ways in our little Perl bubble and don't reach that much outside of it, and we can see the consequences of that at the CCC when they give keynotes almost. Major talks in the biggest room with 1,000 people looking at them, saying Perl is horrible. That's a consequence of us not going out there and showing off the cool stuff. But first, before we can show off the cool stuff, let's kind of think about what we actually mean with cool, what the aesthetics are. I have given you some ideas now, and then give ourselves a reason to do our absolutely best when we publish stuff, because the stuff you guys choose to publish, which is awesome, the next guy can come and say, look at and point and say, hey, this is awesome. You should look at this. And it means all kinds of positive consequences if you just do that.
So there are actually two ways to do advocacy for Perl or Perl 6. The one that Salve is advocating, I would call it the Haskell way, show off elegant, nice code. There's also the PHP way of saying, I don't care how this code looks as long as it gets the job done, and look at how many sites on the internet use WordPress. So I think we should strive for both, actually. Not only writing developer tools and writing clean, maintainable, understandable, elegant code, but also write applications that people want to use.
That sounds like a talk you could give.
Yes. So we're approaching the coffee break now. So let's everybody thank Salve again for his great talk.
Before we quit, in this discussion here, let's see if we can. No. So don't. Okay. So.
F5 for starting the presentation again.
Yeah. So let's call. I've been trying to figure out if you can put a name to this, because this is not literate programming. There's already a concept that's called like that, which is some strange stuff about comments and documentation and mixed in with code and stuff. But I would like, if anybody here thinks this is something worthwhile trying to figure out, making good examples for people to follow. What do we mean? Figure out what do we actually mean with this. If anybody here would be interested in, say, setting up a mailing list where we can discuss this aspect of how to make cool code, how do we do it? What rules can we, or suggestions can we give people? Raise your hand and let's see if we can do something. I would love to see if this is like something is worth exploring. Or talk on 2 people, 3. If you guys are up for something like that, talk with me afterwards.
Okay, thank you. Now